something like that starts happening to you, you don't necessarily want to believe that it is really happening to you. It's easier to believe that it's happening to other people.
The U.S. Navy has finally acknowledged that videos appearing to show UFOs flying through the air are real. Tom, what do you think we're looking at here?
Well, I think we may well be looking at a true unknown.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are.
But if something happens to you, you kind of think maybe there's something wrong with you. You don't really want to take that step to believe, even if it's something that it's very obvious, it's just as real as this couch here and us talking. That's how real these experiences are. I'm Zach Humway. I'm from Jonesboro, Arkansas. With this subject, I'd have to go back to the beginning. When I was a kid, it was around the fall of 79 or 80, and this was back in Little Rock. It was over at my grandmother's house, and let's see, it was the evening, and we were about to go home, but my parents and my brother had gone over to the neighbor's house to talk with them in the evening, you know, just before we left, just like people did back then. And I was just leaning against the car. I wasn't much interested in what they had to say, so I was leaning against the car. And I was looking back toward my grandmother's house, and I happened to just be looking at the storm door, and I saw some red light reflected in it, and it just kind of went up like that. And it looked like the brake lamps on a car. I don't know how, but at the time I just knew that there were people in the lights, and they weren't from here. And after that, I continued to see some craft throughout my childhood and early adulthood. They started showing up 2 nights before my 33rd birthday. That's when I remember. I had gotten up in the middle of the night, and I saw something like a 3D shadow standing by the bed, and it sort of scooted to the side. And I had never really studied that much about anything like that, but I just inherently knew this was an alien. This is what this is. That's okay. You know, I didn't feel panicked at that point, and this was over on the north end of town when we lived in a single-wide trailer over there when we were going through college, early family. And when it stepped to the side, that actually, it was occupying space that was already occupied. We had some decorative pillows there, and there was a wall there, and behind that wall was the bathroom, and we were in the master bedroom. And when it stepped back, it was in those pillows and the wall, so it was not solid. It kind of just occupied that same space somehow. And it was just kind of this dark, shadowy, it was in the shape of a small figure, and it kind of looked like it was filled with like dark spider webs or tendrils or something, like a network of something. Veins or something, I don't know, but it was just in that shape. And at the time I wasn't afraid of it, which was really peculiar. That's, you know, typically you wake up, something strange is in your house, you freak out, but I didn't, you know, and it didn't occur to me to. I didn't know that I had to go to the bathroom, and so I literally just got up and walked beside it and went to the bathroom. And then while I'm sitting there going to the bathroom, I'm thinking, okay, it's waiting for me to go to sleep. Somehow I just knew there was like this laser-like coherency that I could sense from it, that he was just waiting for me to go to sleep. And so I knew I couldn't just fake it. And so I'm sitting here hatching this plan that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let myself go to sleep. And I could lucid dream, so whenever I get to sleep, I can just catch myself and wake myself up real quick and try to grab it. And so I did that a few times. And the last time, I didn't hit anything. You know, it just, I guess it stayed back, and then I just went back to sleep, tried it again, and nothing happened. I think it was about the 3rd time, I let myself go a little too far, and instead of reaching out with this hand, I just panicked. I reached out with this hand, and I grabbed a torso, and it hit it, and it grabbed my hand, and it just kind of started patting it, like, it's okay, it's all right. And I felt my face smile, and I just laid back down and I went to sleep. And And this is where missing time happened. And for anyone who's not familiar with missing time is like a jump cut in your life. It's, let's see, the film strip of your life goes from event A to B to C, and this is like you take event B and remove it from your film strip of life here, and then you just splice A and C together. So as soon as I laid back down and went to sleep, I closed my eyes, and the very next instant, I'm in a white room, and I'm walking towards a group of small beings that are about 3.5, 4 foot tall. I have the idea that there are a couple behind me, maybe walking me, and that's the reason I'm walking towards them, but I don't know. It's just a big white room. And when I say white, the surfaces of everything was giving off like this hazy, soft white light. The floors, the part of the walls, it kind of arched up like a rib. That was giving off light. It was light coming from, it was just everything was giving off this soft white light. And I'm walking towards this group of small beings that are just loosely collected there, and they're all just looking up at me. And I'm just looking at one in particular, and I stop probably about 6 feet in front of her, and I have the impression that it's an older female. It kind of looks like an older being. It's bald, and they're wearing what look like cloaks. They're navy blue with silver. There's like a silver panel that goes down the hood that way, and then this is navy blue, and then there's about an inch wide silver panel coming around the collar and going down the front. That's just what they were dressed in. Had the hood up. And she was just looking up at me. And at that moment, I just stopped in front of her, and I was thinking, at this point, I can either freak out or I can try to make the best of the situation. And so I just decided I'll go ahead and try to make the best of the situation, and not thinking much, I just decided I'm just going to try to shake hands. And so I go to shake hands, and as I'm doing that, I'm thinking, that's really stupid. This isn't a human being. They don't know to shake hands. But she met me halfway. She just reached up and smiled and took my hand, and I just immediately got this incredible feeling. It's one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. It was a feeling like absolute guardianship or something. It was like a baby being held by its mother for the first time. It was just a wonderful feeling. Like nothing bad would happen to me, that everything was fine, everything was safe, and that I was loved or appreciated or something. I don't have rational reactions to them when they do show up. I would be terrified that they would show up. And sometimes I would kind of feel, I could tell whenever they were going to show up because there was this sort of busy feeling in the house, you know, or it would feel like, you know, getting ready for Thanksgiving. If everyone's cooking and cleaning, but you take all the people out of the house and it's just that busy feeling. It felt like that, like something was just beyond the veil preparing for something, or I don't know. But I could always tell they were going to show up because of that, usually, in most cases. But sometimes I would go to bed and I would be afraid they would show up, and sometimes they wouldn't. But then when they did, it always felt like, oh, it's okay. It's all right. It didn't feel like that was being pushed on me. It just felt like that was just my genuine reaction, you know, even though it's irrational. And I have a feeling that it's probably irrational, and it's probably because they're just trying to keep me calm. It seems like they go to exceptional lengths to just be as inobtrusive in my life as possible, and that sometimes I just kind of screw that up.
Misty Humway, and I am Zachary's wife. I was working on my master's degree for choir, and he was in the He was in the choir as well, and so I had seen him visually. He was on stage in a small production, a walk-on role. It was back in October, November of '97, and he walked on stage, and it was like, before he even opened his mouth, it was, "Who is that?" Because it was just like, you know, the proverbial thunderbolt. Yeah, that was what we had. So I am from Pocahontas, which is about 45 minutes northwest of here. And there's a community that has Christmas display at Christmas time. I was 12 years old at the time. But I remember that it was December 12th in particular, because of the events of that night. It solidified in my head. We had gone out, and this is in a rural area. There aren't a lot of lights. And we were coming back from the display, and this was 1986 because Halley's Comet had just come around. And so that was fresh on everybody's mind. And I have a younger brother. He was 6. He had just turned 6. And he's sitting, these were the olden days when we didn't wear seatbelts, and we had a van that was just a whole van. There was, we hauled sound equipment in it. And so I was in a lawn chair in the middle, in between the bucket seats, and my brother was sitting on my mom's lap, and he looks out the window. He says, "Look, Mom, there's 2 Halley's Comets." And my brother and I, we were typical brother and sister, and I looked at him and I was like, "Stupid, Halley's Comet's already gone." And my mom goes, "Well, then what's that?" And so we look off to out the right-hand window, and there are 2. It looked just like comets, just they're balls with tails, and they're right on top of each other. And I was like, "Well, okay then." And we stared at it for just a second, and then it was on top of us. It was right there. And I remember looking up at it, and you couldn't discern a shape of anything, but it just looked like glowing embers. But it hovered for a very long time. We're staring at it. What is that? My dad is having a hard time with it because you can tell that he's a little nervous. And so he's making up, "Oh, well, there's an Air Force base over there. They're probably running maneuvers. They have, silencers on these things. You can't hear," because we rolled down the windows and you could hear nothing. There was no wind, there was nothing. And so it was absolutely silent, but it was so close. In my kid head, it's really kind of hard to distinguish how close it was, but I remember feeling it just is barely above the poles, the electrical poles, and the lights will kind of go in and out, and we're still having this conversation. My dad gets out. We were not the only ones that were stopped. There was a line of cars, and we all stopped. And my dad gets out of the car because the guy in front of him got out of his car and was looking up at it. And so my dad goes and has a conversation with him. It's still there. And I remember while he was having that conversation, it just goes, and then you could tell that it started the motion to our left, but you couldn't see it. There was nothing else. You just, the start of a really fast motion, and then nothing. And we were just sitting there going, "Okay, what was that?" In I needed to know an answer like right away. So when we got back home, in those days, World Book encyclopedias were our friends. And so I went immediately to go look up, because my head, I'm thinking it was a meteor shower. That has to be a meteor shower. I wasn't thinking alien craft, because it didn't, in my head, what I looked at didn't seem that way. So I look up in there, and there is, I believe it's the Aeneid shower that happens on right in that time frame of December 12th. And I was like, okay, cool. Know what it is. And Terry Wood, who was our weatherman, our local weatherman at the time, he had come on. It was time for the news, so he came on and had said there had been a reporting. There had been he was saying people have seen some stuff in the sky tonight. It's a meteor shower, and I was like, okay, I just looked that up. Awesome. Let's keep going. And I would have been perfectly fine with that if he had not, at the very end of that broadcast, come back on and said, we misreported earlier. We've gotten word that what actually happened, it was a Russian missile that had gone off course. Excuse me, in the middle of the Cold War? I mean, I wasn't thinking that as a 12-year-old, but, and I thought, that wasn't a missile. My mom, and we still talk about this, and my mother is not in this realm at all. Straight as an arrow, right as rain, but this thing. If you weren't there, you don't know. And we've just talked to her recently, and she even remembers that it was oblong shape. She remembers seeing a shape. Now, I don't. Again, I have a growing brain. I'm not a full adult. I'm 12. Old enough to really remember details, but not, an adult that's going, okay, what is this? And so she actually goes to church with someone who he just retired from KAIT, from the station. And she asked him if there was anything in the archives, if they didn't keep recordings. All of these things, it is hard for me to talk about because, I have children and I have family members and I have people that view me in a certain way, and, this can be very difficult. It's difficult for me now in a different way than it was difficult then. It's difficult for me now because I have these feelings of letting him down and not being who I was supposed to be when he was going through those. Because
it's fine. You can take a minute.
Yeah.
I know this is
It's just not an easy. It's not an easy.
Yeah.
Thing. People,
he is everything to me, and so to know that he had to go through something like that, and me not be supportive, and him not feel like he could tell me, because he is right. When he tried to talk about it, I shut it down. I don't want to talk about that because I was convinced that he was crazy. And every other aspect of life is not crazy.
When this started happening, I was talking to a psychiatrist about it because I was still holding out the possibility that I was crazy. I was comfortable with the fact that, hey, I'm crazy. That's it. I'm breaking up. There's something wrong. I'm not hallucinating any other part of the day, but maybe this is what this is, and that's all. You'll take some medicine and be fine. So I went in and I talked to my doctor about it. Like, look, there's some things happening. And there's some things showing up in the middle of the night, next to the beds. I don't think they're human, and I had never talked to him about this kind of thing. I don't know if I'd talked to him about UFOs before yet or not. I don't know, but his concern was, well, maybe something is wrong, and so he prescribed some antipsychotics. And for the next 2 years, I ended up taking different antipsychotics to see if that would affect what was going on. And the only thing that happened was I had a different set of side effects. But I would tell him everything. Every time I went in, I would just tell him about what's happening, and we'd talk about it, and we'd try something else. And even though it's so physical, because of the nature of what it is, it's just hard to accept that it's real. And so that's what I was talking to my doctor about. And finally, I was telling him about those events, and I was like, I couldn't feel their skin. And then I opened my eyes, and I was in the same position. He was listening. He says, I think those are flashbacks. I'm going to prescribe stelazine for that. And that's when he told me, I think this is really happening to you. You know, he just came clean and just said it. And I was like, okay. And I remember feeling guilty. I felt the whole time talking to him, I just feel guilty talking about it, but I feel like I should. I know it sounds funny to feel like you don't want to inconvenience your psychiatrist with weird stuff, you know, but I really didn't. I didn't want to have this invade his headspace because it was just all in mine, and it was everything I could do just to keep sane through it.
Yeah, I know him, and I know that he's not crazy. And at this one particular night that I had sleep paralysis, I am on my right side, and I'm rolling over to get on my left side, and I am conscious enough to know that that's what I'm doing, but I am also asleep enough to not make it all the way to the other side. And I made it halfway, and it was like I had no more energy or whatever. And as soon as I did that, it put me straight into a sleep paralysis state. And I hear a ship above the house. It's like it sounds like it's right on top of my ceiling. And it's just this mechanical whirl. And about the time I realized what I was hearing, I'm literally sucked to the ceiling. And I'm looking down, and I can look down at Zach. I'm okay. And then my first thought was, well, shit, he was right the whole time. Here I am, I'm sucked. That's obviously a spaceship, and I am being sucked to the ceiling, and this is ridiculous, and I'm pissed about it. And so then at that moment I went, no, that's not what's happening. You are having, you remember you were rolling over and you got stuck, and that's what's happening. You just need to pant and have him wake you up, and that's the system we worked out. If I pant when I'm in the middle of a sleep paralysis episode, then he will shake me, and then I can wake up. And I did it. And as soon as I woke up, I was ticked at him. I said, yeah, you're not going to believe this one. I'll save it for the morning. I'll tell you about it in the morning, but I'm not telling you about it right now. Yeah. Part of what my hesitancy was earlier is it's not that I'm afraid for myself anymore. My job, I feel like one of my main jobs on this planet is to protect my kids. And so when we talk about things that we'll talk about in a little bit, when it involves my kids, that's when I get angry and really scared, and I'm very protective.
One child who saw a face in a window, and the strange thing about it is the window it's a second-story window, and on the other side of this window it's just a flat wall. I mean, I don't even have a ladder to get up there to like paint the windowsill or anything like that. I'd need a 60-foot ladder to get up there. So it's just a flat wall going up, and at that window up there, she said she saw a face looking in the window like that. And she said, had big round eyes, 0 eyelids. And I noticed that they stayed downstairs for about 3 weeks after that in the evenings, and later found out that they couldn't go to sleep because unless the lights were on for about a few weeks after that. I had always looked for some kind of validation, like maybe with her, so that I would have like, you know, some kind of validation, like, yeah, that's really happening. And then, you know, this child starts describing things that are just too familiar. Years before before she even said anything about having any kind of experience or anything, I was sleeping on the couch in the living room, and I woke up, but my eyes were still closed. And I got what I call pretext, which is just kind of, they put like some kind of notion in your head that you're supposed to go along with. And it was, oh, there's a couple of girls who are coming over to spend the night with your girls. And, you know, they're going to spend the night upstairs. And you know, I hadn't discussed this with anyone. No one's discussed this or anything. And I open my eyes and I see this little being walking up to me, and it's wearing a dark cloak, and it has like a thick piece of fabric around its shoulders and lower mouth, like a scarf or a cow collar or something like that. And it's just a little bald head. And it's just walking up to me, and then it starts talking, and I have earplugs and I can't hear it. So I lean up on my elbows and I take my earplug out and lean in, and it's just saying random words like brown, chair, pencil, cow. And I'm sitting here listening for a while, and it's just random English words. And finally there's no sentence structure or anything, so I just go like that and put my earplug back in and lay back down. And it just turns and goes into the kitchen, and that's how you kind of go upstairs. As you go into the kitchen, you go up the stairs once you go out. And so, and then she, you know, years later, she told me she had this fever dream that there was this small being next to the bed saying random English words to her. And then that comes out, and I realized that they're not ready for this conversation, and neither am I. It just can't happen. You know, it just, it's too much. And they've mentioned other things, you know. Actually, 2 kids have mentioned at nighttime sometimes hearing something coming up the stairs, heavier than a cat, but lighter than any of them. Come up a little ways, then go back down. One time she heard something out in the snow when it snowed really bad. She was out there playing in the snow and heard what sounded like someone trying to speak English who doesn't know English. It sounded like English sounding sounds, but not words. You know, I haven't had any experiences in a long time, but this child is talking about them. Because I couldn't really talk to anyone, art has always been like therapeutic for me. It's just something I can do. It keeps my mind engaged. I can just kind of get stuff out in art. And so naturally, when this happened, I started thinking more and more about it. And I was like, you know what? I think I can render them. I can go ahead and model them and render them as I remember them. And that'll be like getting them out in front of me and sort of like being able to deal with it, just kind of processing it, just going through it. And so I just went ahead and came up with models of them, textured them, rendered them, started putting them in art pieces. And that was just a big part of how I processed it and got through it. Just because art was how I processed things and got through things, you know. It was just something that, it's helped me out a lot in the past. So naturally, it was going to come out in art. Experiencing something that, if it were televised and people saw it, it would change the whole of human history. The biggest thing in our species' history is actually making contact with something that isn't us, that's from somewhere else, and that, you know, and there's something about that, like, that kind of wears off. Like, I remember on my birthday, the morning I woke up, I was thinking about that. I was like, oh my God, I was with aliens. And then by that afternoon, I was like, oh my God, I was with aliens, you know, and it's like the shock hit me, and I was like, it really set in, and I was like, God, what do I do with this?